Welcome to Mr. Rodman's highlights for Chapter 9 on campaigns and elections. We're going to run through Mr. Rodman's top 12 highlights from this chapter. We'll start with number 1. Elections may occur in fixed, staggered, or limited terms. Remember, every House of Representatives seat is up for re-election or election every 2 years. That is a fixed term for their elections. Staggered terms are what we see in the U.S. Senate. That means a third of the Senate is up every 2 years because they serve 6-year terms. So they are what we call staggered seats, meaning 33 or 34% of the seats are up at any 2-year interval, with 100% of the seats up after 3 of those 2-year cycles, meaning everyone has run for election or re-election at that particular point in time. And then lastly, the limited election we have is from the presidency, and that basically is limited to 2 4-year terms. So the president is a lame duck after winning 2 4-year terms because they cannot serve anymore under the 22nd Amendment. That basically said the president may serve 2 4-year terms, and that is it. Moving on to the second item on Rodman's top 12, term limits. Don't forget that, and I kind of alluded to this, the idea of the only term limited office nationally is the office of president. House of Representatives and Senate seats are not term limited. The Supreme Court actually ruled that unconstitutional when a state tried to do that before. The third topic, the Electoral College. Remember, 270 is that magic number. Why do we have the Electoral College? Because the framers and founders didn't trust the people to choose the president. There are a total of 538 total number of electoral votes. That includes 100 senators, 435 House members, and 3 for the District of Columbia under the 23rd Amendment. But 270 is the magic number you need because that's one more than half, and you need a majority in order to win the presidency in the Electoral College. The winner-take-all rule applies to 48 of the 50 states. All but Maine and Nebraska award their electoral votes with a majority that is won, meaning if you win the most votes in that state, you win all of the electoral votes for that state. Maine and Nebraska, the only exception. Remember, states are deciding how they conduct elections, and Maine and Nebraska have decided to award their electoral votes based on their congressional districts and who wins those. And the remaining 2 seats would be statewide. Whoever wins statewide would win those 2 Senate electoral votes. But the states decide how they conduct those elections, and Maine and Nebraska have decided to do theirs differently in that regard. Is it possible to win the popular vote but lose the Electoral College? You bet it is. Ask Al Gore. As you can see here, he won nearly 500,000 more votes on the popular vote, but did not win the Electoral College, and therefore he did not win the presidency. The electoral process, don't forget, the Tuesday after the first Monday in November is General Election Day. The state election day is the Electoral College, and that is held the Monday after the second Wednesday in November. That's where states get together, all the electors of the winning candidate get together to cast their electors for president. And the real election day happens in the Senate on January 6th, where the president of the Senate, essentially the vice president, opens the electoral votes, reads them, and counts them. And then the inauguration day where the president is sworn in, the new president is sworn in, would be on January 20th. The electoral colleges, there are advantages and disadvantages. You guys can take a look and break these down, but essentially it's a system that the framers and founders wanted to ensure the election was not a popularity contest, and so they came up with this. They also wanted people who are making the decisions to be informed voters, but as you can imagine, one of the disadvantages is it's really hard for people to understand it. The winner-take-all does tend to distort the will of the people, and sometimes people win the most votes and don't win, as in the case of Al Gore. Then you can review those on your own. And we've kind of gone over the Electoral College in terms of how that breaks down with those 538, but you can review that on your own time. Number 7, the election of the House of Representatives. Remember, there are safe seats because of incumbency advantage. The incumbent has an advantage over the challenger to keep that seat. They're more well-known. They have better visibility. Gerrymandering also tends to favor one party's candidate over another. And then the coattails. If the president is a popular president and winning re-election, chances are they're going to take along with them other seats in the House and Senate to help them out with that. The president's party usually does lose seats in the midterms, and that's especially when the president is fighting their first midterm, and that's because of the idea that many of the policies of the president aren't as popular as one might like them to be. But the president's party usually does lose in midterms, but it's sometimes a good sign that they might have a better shot at winning in the either re-election or in other prospects for president in 2 years. Why are Iowa and New Hampshire so important in the presidential contest? Because of front loading. They want to get candidates to spend time and especially money. It's an economic point of view in their state. The media exposure is also another example. Front runners get a lot more media coverage, and anybody who's doing anything outrageous as a candidate in that state is also going to win them media coverage, which is going to get them on the nightly news. And all of those are reasons why a state would want to be up front. Front loading very key to getting people to visit your state and to spend more time there with your constituents and your voters. Campaign finance highlights. Briefly, you can go into more detail here in reading these, but FECA 1971 and then modified in 1974 after the Watergate scandal basically created the FEC, the Federal Election Commission. It provided partial public funding for presidential candidates, but most of them to this point, and nobody in 2012 accepted public funding, so that's essentially dead. But a candidate could accept it, but they can collect a lot more money outside of it than they would collect for it with public funding. Buckley v. Valeo said if you want to spend your own money, the Donald Trump example, you can use it. It also created PACs, political action committees, which we will see with campaign finance highlights, has expanded to a lot more than just PACs in this day and age. And then BCRA, the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act of 2002, otherwise known as McCain-Feingold, outlawed soft money. It did ban soft money, and it banned a lot of other things, but those were ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court of the United States. The other item that it did was also limited individual contributions and actually allowed them to be adjusted for inflation. So those would rise with the cost of living index, with the CPI, the Consumer Price Index. So we see that $2,500 is now $2,700 adjusted for inflation. PACs, super PACs, 527s, and 501c4s, we've talked about a lot in class, but remember PACs are the fundraising arm of interest groups, businesses. Even candidates have their own PACs. 527s are more tax-exempt groups that are engaging in political activities, often through soft money contributions. They don't have a limit to what they can collect. They do have to report it, but they cannot have any affiliation with a candidate once they've announced their candidacy. Super PACs very similar to 527s, but we mainly see these cropping up more raising unlimited amounts of money and many times from unknown sources, and we won't know about those. We call that dark money in our class until after the election is over. But they cannot be affiliated with a candidate either, just like 527s. And then 501c4s are not-for-profit groups who primarily serve a non-political purpose, but can advocate for and against issues as long as their candidate is not affiliated with their program, and that 50.1% of their purpose is non-political. They can collect unlimited amounts. The donors aren't public, so they are collecting from anonymous donors, and they don't have to disclose that information. So it's another way for dark money out there to not have to be publicly listed. And you can take a look at these in terms of how that breaks down for the contribution limits. We talked about that in class, as well as where the money's coming from and where it's going to. We can see in the upper portion here, the nonprofits are getting a lot of anonymous money in large amounts. The 527s also getting money, super PACs getting money as well, but that all 527s and super PACs is reported. Federal PACs are still alive and well, getting money from individuals. And another way for candidates to collect money outside of the individual limit, because they can collect up to $5,000 from a candidate for their PAC from an individual. And then national parties as well, collecting also larger money from individuals for their campaigns. And then lastly, the campaign finance landmark court cases, the two that we've mentioned repeatedly, Citizens United and McCutcheon v. FEC. The Citizens United case was in 2010, and it basically said corporations can't be limited in terms of what they can spend. BCRA was basically limiting that, and it was challenged 8 years later in this Citizens United case. And it basically said corporations or unions can spend whatever they want to support or denounce candidates as long as they're doing it indirectly from candidates, and it's not directly contributing the money to candidates, and they can do that outside of those. So they can create a super PAC and spend all the money they want to for or against a candidate. And then McCutcheon v. FEC in 2014, the Supreme Court said that if you want to try and limit the number of checks that a person can write in up to that $2,700 per candidate per election amount, you can't do that. If a person wants to write unlimited numbers of checks to different candidates, you can't cap it in that they can only donate to a certain number of individuals. And that was something that was capped, and in McCutcheon, the Supreme Court ruled that unconstitutional. Another thing to note with Citizens United, also they said that with the 527s, that they didn't have to limit themselves to not being able to advocate for or against a candidate. So after the Citizens United ruling, a 527 can advocate for or against a particular candidate, and they couldn't do that prior to Citizens United. So that's essentially the chapter highlights. Hope you've found this helpful, and if you want to go back through and read it again or listen again, you're more than welcome to. Hope you find this helpful. Please give me your feedback. I do appreciate it.